Hello and welcome back to Rick's Woodworking. Today I'm going to build a tray. Now I'm sure you've seen 1,000 videos of tray building out there on YouTube. But as often happens with me, I get asked at the last minute to help out and I go ahead and find some scrap. And here I'm just milling up a 2x6 because I need some panels. And decided that rather than use my joiner, I was going to use a joining sled on my table saw. And since all these pieces are generally the same length, I'm going to go ahead and glue them up all at the same time with one set of clamps. But you'll notice that I only put glue on certain surfaces. You'll also, if you're really looking at it, you'll see there's two pieces of oak down there because one of the requirements was, can you make the base interesting? And here, just a little bit of clamping pressure, plenty of glue on the joints, and we have the opportunity for some really nice panels. With all of them glued up overnight, went ahead and used my scraper to get rid of the excess glue. And because I didn't really use cauls or anything to get the thickness just right or all the alignments, we're going to use my planer to get everything down to the same thickness. Those two pieces of oak happen to be a little thicker, which makes this interesting. Now, two of the sides are going to be a little taller because I'm going to put some handles on it. And in this shot, you may notice that there's a bit of carving there in the center. I actually used my CNC to cut that out, and unfortunately didn't have the shot on camera. Now, this base, which is where the carving is a panel, and it goes between the sides. And the best way to do that is to make a dado, or a rabbet actually. And just using the table saw with a 1/4 inch reveal. I'll then move to the router so I can set up a 1/4 inch bit that will fit that panel and run the sides through. You'll notice that the sides haven't been cut to length, and that's intentional. I don't really know the exact measurements of the panel at this point, so I left everything long. And here I'm just checking the fit with the test piece. The fact that the bottom is a little off is okay. I'm just going to use some 45-degree miters to get this all put together. But that means I got to do some measuring. And here the sides that are a bit taller are kind of obvious, and a little later you'll see how I make handles for those. Did my cuts multiple times. I set my table saw for this. I could have used the power miter saw, but I find I don't get as precise a cut with that. So several passes. I've also added an extension fence to my miter gauge. Usually helps out in these cases. You could use a panel, but again, for me, that was the best way. Now here I'm laying out the centers of those sides so that I can go ahead and route out what will become the handles. Just using a pattern following bit. And that does a pretty nice job of cutting it open. I'm using multiple passes. Don't want to overload the bit. And I'm just using some scrap wood to make that jig. With that set, I went ahead and started looking at how do I do the roundovers to make it a full curved handle, and just used a socket that was the approximate size. And just go through very carefully on my bandsaw to get those cuts just right. And then do some sanding. This is just my drill press with a sander. And once I have this laid out, what I ended up doing was creating a secondary jig. I was thinking, I want to make sure I get this just right. And there again, just using a jigsaw to cut that out. Bandsaw's not quite big enough. And once that's set up, again, pattern following bit to get that all cut through. Now, since this is all pine, you got to be careful with splintering, so take your time. Now with all those pieces cut out, take out my sander, do a couple of passes down to 220. And now I want to do a quick round over. And safety tip, you should usually use a pin on your router table, but in this instance I didn't have mine available. I'm not sure where it ended up. and I just had to be very careful as to how I presented that piece of wood so it didn't get caught by the bit. Now I want some contrast here. I want the oak to stand out a little bit more, so I'm masking it off so that I can go ahead and use some different stains on this base. That will really make the oak pop and then give me an opportunity to do some contrasting colors on the pine. And again, this is a 2x6, so this is construction grade lumber. Works really well for these kinds of projects, although it's really soft. Once you get some stain on it and you can get, say, some polyurethane, it'll look great. I'm trying to avoid getting any stain underneath the tape there. That's why those motions. And just, very quickly rag that off. I'm not interested in getting some deep color. I just want some contrast. And since I've done the center, which is pine versus the oak, I'm going to add an additional color to that after doing some light sanding. That will give me, again, some nice contrasts on that base. Now I'm going to poly that center. Oh, actually, not polying. I'm going to whitewash it. I recall exactly what I was doing here. I thinned out the paint, went ahead and put that on, and very quickly ragged it off. Since it's already been sealed with stain, it's not going to absorb deep into the wood. And there you can see that contrast that I was talking about. And just using standard painter's tape, nothing special. Last little bit of sanding on the sides, especially inside the handles, to get those soft to the touch. And now I'm going to use the tape technique to get my miters to set up properly. You've probably seen this in a lot of videos. It's simply bring the pieces together, butt together, use the tape so that it holds them in place as temporary clamps, and you can see it makes our shape. Now all we got to do is slide our piece inside to make sure it fits. And it's just a dry fit. In a little bit I'll go ahead and put in some glue on those miters. Now I want to mask off my mitered edges, especially on the inside. I won't be able to get to them very easily. And this allows me to not worry so much about too much glue. Now I do have to cut out where the panel goes in, or else it won't fit, and I'll end up with blue tape and markings. A little bit of glue. I happen to be using some Titebond waterproof glue. It's what I had in the shop. And I figured it probably makes sense given that this is going to be a tray for coffees and it'll probably end up getting washed at some point. Put glue on all the surfaces and just start putting the panel in and wrapping it. Nothing too fancy. Like anyone else, I have anxiety about glue ups. Did I put enough glue? Is it going to not work out too well because the set time's not long enough or too short, whatever. Bring all the pieces together and add additional tape to that last miter. And then just do some cleanup with a thin spatula or knife if you'd rather use that. Now here I'm preparing to reinforce those corners. And I'm using a simple technique with a saw blade and a stop so that I get even cutouts so I could put those splines in. And simply using some sandpaper to get the thickness right, I'm going to go ahead and add these in. Plenty of glue, get them wedged in there, tap them in so they're set nice and flat, and those will add a tremendous amount of strength. And since I used oak here, I'll get a nice contrast with that. Again, using my bandsaw, I'm able to cut those out and get it down to where my sander can easily take care of it. Now I'm using some white again on the base. Just wanted a whitewash finish on this. So that will provide a lot of protection. The paint will seal all the wood. And again, it's a tray. Just dampen my rag and go over the surfaces to pick up any excess and leave a thin sheen of paint. Here I've thinned the paint first. On the bottom I was using full strength. Against the bottom, who's going to see that? But just using a wet rag and moving my way around. Do some light sanding now that the wood has expanded. And then 3 coats of polyurethane. Using a HVLP sprayer to get a nice even coat. Again, 3 coats of polyurethane with some sanding in between to prepare the surface for the next coat. And there you have it. A nice little tray. Only took a weekend to put this sucker together. So hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you'll join us again on Rick's Woodworking.